First of all, thank you all for being here with such short notice, and I apologize for the short notice, but I'm going to talk a little bit today about class and comp and the pay for performance plan. And right now I'll tell you right up front, the plan for pay for performance has not been finalized, but the importance of the things we're going to discuss today, and quite frankly, it shouldn't be a surprise, but we threw a lot of information out at you when we did class and comp and when we initiated the class and comp program, that what we're finding in talking to people throughout the town is that there still is a lot of misunderstanding of what the class and compensation philosophy is for the town of Gilbert. And understanding that there are two separate plans, one for sworn lieutenant and below, and then one for civilians and sworn, covering the ranks of commander-in-chief. So I'm going to go back through, and what I will tell you is if you got a question, ask it. I'm going to do the best I can to answer it. I know up front I'm going to touch some nerves again, and I understand that. If I tell you that, but that's the way that it is, I'm not being insensitive. This is the plan that the town has. And we really need to understand it as we move into pay for performance. And we need to understand it how pay for performance is going to impact both the sworn side, the civilian side. There may be some things that I'm not going to have answers to today because we haven't finalized the pay for performance program. But the things that we're going to talk about today really lead into it. And I'm hoping to get everything on the table, get it up front, make sure people have a good understanding. I can't tell you the whys. I'm not the one who developed the program. I don't want to get into a lot of philosophical discussion whether it's good or it's bad. What I will tell you is this: most of you in this room are supervisors. And what the expectation is that as people come to you, and if we have people that are unhappy, and I understand that we have people that have not gotten raises for a number of years, people who did not get raises as a result of the class and compensation. Whether they're going to get raises in the future or not is unknown right now. And I know that's a hard pill for some people to swallow. I understand that. I get it. But there's nothing I can do to change that. And what the expectation is of our supervisors, we let people vent. We let people, it's okay to listen, to hear people out, to hear their concerns. But in the end of the day, the program is the program for the town of Gilbert that has been approved by our town council. And what I expect from our supervisors is to not jump on the bandwagon and become part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So want to get that up front. And the reason I'm saying that is there has been, not necessarily in the police department, but there's been some problems through the town where people are coming in, expressing their frustrations, and supervisors are then echoing the frustrations, which just leads to more frustrations and doesn't accomplish anything. So that's that courage piece of that you accept when you become a supervisor, is sometimes what may be seen as unpopular decisions are made, and when those unpopular decisions are made, it's our job to support those decisions as bosses in the organization. And I'm not saying that this was a bad decision, not saying it's unpopular by the entire town. There's pros and there's cons, just like there are pros and cons with any program that's instituted. Let me talk first on the sworn side. On the sworn side, lieutenant and below, the job rate, and one thing we're going to talk, we talk about mid-range, we talk about market rate, we call the pay a lot of different things, and what we're trying to do now is get that standardization, and that standardization that everybody needs to think about is job rate. The job rate for sworn personnel is the lieutenant and below is the top of the pay range. Sworn personnel still are involved in pay for performance. You have to have successful performance in order to advance to the next step. People who perform at an acceptable rate move through the system, and I believe it's 7 years. It's not necessarily 5%, 5%, 5%, but it moves through the increments to the job rate, which is the top of the range, in that I believe it's a 7-year period of time, based on successful performance. If there's unsuccessful performance, then that person is not eligible to advance to the next rate. There's not a guarantee that you will be at the top of the range in 7 years. And it's, again, based on that the timeline. I believe it's from the date that you finished your, was it probation, Ray? I'm looking for you. I saw you here somewhere. We've talked this over and over. The date that's based on, was it end of probation or was it end of FTO? Do you remember? It's somewhere in there, based on that. It's important to realize that that is still pay for performance. On the non-sworn side, and for commanders and myself, the job rate is what was identified when we gave you those big pay ranges and we moved people through the ranges up to that midpoint. That midpoint is the job rate. People advance from the beginning rate to the job rate in either 2 or 3 years, depending on what band that they're in, whether they're an A band or a B band. Most C bands are in exempt status, so they're a little bit different, but you still, and most of us still move through over a period of time to get to that job rate, which is the middle of the range. Some of what has caused confusion is we keep publishing these big ranges, and we've created an expectation by most people. What they're seeing is this top of range, and they're comparing our salaries to top of range, and as a result of that, people are still thinking along the lines of our old system of eventually I'm going to get to top of range. You need to change that way of thinking. There are some opportunities to receive additional pay above the job rate, and that's going to come in the form of pay for performance. What pay for performance is not is a way to automatically move through steps that if you exceed standards each year for a certain number of years that you're going to make it to the top of your range. The likelihood of that happening is basically slim to none, to be honest with you. So the first thing that people need to change their mindset is basically the top of range is that job rate in the middle. I realize it's short steps. That's based on the council philosophy of paying within the 50 percentile. That's the philosophy council adopted. That's where the job rate is established at, is at the 50 percentile. The 50 percentile on the sworn side is based on that top of being in the middle of what the top range is for sworn personnel. Pay for performance can come in two types, and that is based on, it could be a one-time pay incentive based on exceptional performance, or it can be an adjustment to your range. Right now, our current focus is on one-times. And that's what I think you can expect is going to be the norm, is one-time payments, whether you call it a bonus, whatever you call it, and that number hasn't been decided yet. Well, if you meet this, exceed standards, Is it going to be 5% of your rate? What is it? We haven't established that yet, and part of that's driven by budget. How much money is available to put into pay for performance for that year? It's very difficult on an overall basis to clearly define what exceed standards is, which is part of that issue in moving that base pay. And then if we move the base pay, then we have to have the money the following year to make sure that we can continue to pay that base rate. The manager's made it very clear that he wants to make sure that first of all, everybody has an opportunity outside of the sworn side, and I'm going to divert to the sworn side here for a second. As it stands right now, and what I expect to be the policy is that sworn personnel will not be eligible for pay for performance bonuses because you're already getting pay for performance. You're getting pay for performance up to the top of your range, and you can't be paid in excess of your top of range. So because of that, sworn personnel are probably not, most likely not going to be eligible for pay for performance incentives because you're already receiving pay for performance incentives to move you to the top of your range. So now back on the non-sworn side. The incentives can be based on a group goal, and these are the things we're still working on right now. And I'll give you an example, and my background investigators that are in here, don't shoot the messenger. I'm using this as an example. I'm not saying this is what your goal is going to be, okay? For some departments, it could be not necessarily fairly simple, but it could be well defined that in, say, Public Works, if Public Works has a departmental goal and they exceed that departmental goal, everybody in that department could be eligible for that departmental goal. Or it may break out to a section of Public Works. Could break down to a team or a squad or a group of people. Same thing in the police department, except the challenge that we have a little bit is because sworn personnel won't be eligible for it, then it's going to be a little more difficult for a department-wide goal for everybody in the department. An example that I can give you on a group goal would be right now this year, one of the performance goals that has been given to me by my boss is for us to take a look at our hiring process. And the goal is for our Office of Professional Standards to meet with Town HR. And Town HR has a goal to take a look at their process in the overall hiring within the town to see if there's any system improvements that can be made to shorten our time frame in the hiring process without compromising the quality of the people that we hire. Because the number one thing, especially in our business, is the quality. We don't want to give up the quality. And we already have a background system that's recognized throughout the state. And in fact, we have our background investigators teaching other background investigators right now for AZ Post. But we want to take a look and see if there are any systems improvements that we can do that will speed up the process, allow us to fill these positions quicker without compromising that quality. So through that goal this year, let's say that they meet and they come up and say, yeah, we've identified something, and then next year, when I say next year, the next fiscal year, now we identify a goal that says we're going to complete all backgrounds within 30 days of assignment. Not necessarily from when they test, but when that background investigator gets it, 30, and again, I'm not saying that's what it is. Don't shoot the messenger. An example. We give them that goal, and the average comes in 28 days. That we're successfully hitting that mark, and in fact, we're not only hitting the mark, we're exceeding that mark. That demonstrates exceeding the standard that we've had. With that, everybody who's assigned to that section could be eligible for a pay for performance incentive for exceeding performance standards. So I just use that as an example. You all can sit here and kind of think through how does that apply to me. So the next question is, on the sworn side of the house, how does that affect you all? And the challenge that we're going to have is almost an opposite challenge on the sworn side of how do we define successful performance. If we're saying you got to meet successful performance, and we're saying successful performance is not just showing up to work, then how do we define who doesn't meet that standard? And how do we clearly identify, because detectives' specialized assignments have a completely different job than patrol has. And in the specialty assignments, for the most part, if you're not meeting the standards, you're not going to stay in that specialized assignment. So patrol's got that biggest bulk and has that biggest bulk of varying things that they're assigned to do, and has the biggest bulk of, you've got things that you're sent to do, and now you have extra time, and how do you spend that extra time when you're not on calls for service? I want to make it very clear that we're not going to come in and establish quotas and come out and tell you you got to go out and write 10 tickets a month. That's not going to happen. What could happen is that we have some performance benchmarks utilizing the productivity assessment that we already have in place, making some tweaks there that could help us in defining that. And whatever we define is going to be based on what team you work, what station you work out of. It's equal examination. And then we've got the quality piece, that's the supervision piece of you all are responsible for measuring the quality. And the first priority is quality over quantity. But we'll probably be establishing some kind of benchmarks that will come in there and say, here's what successful performance looks like. We're going to tell you what successful performance looks like, with some caveats of understanding if somebody's on FMLA, if somebody's on military, some of those kinds of things that been on vacation, gotten hurt, been on light duty, some of those kinds of things that can impact it. We're going to take that into consideration. And then we're going to work together to come up with what does successful performance look like that we can give to everybody, so that it's clearly understood what it takes to continue to move through, and recognizing that you don't just get paid to show up to work. So what does that look like? I don't have any idea yet. The other piece with pay performance that people need to understand, first of all, not everybody is going to get it. It's for exceptional performance. It's for exceeding standards. There will be some challenges on administrative assistants and some of those types of jobs of how do we define that, but we've got to make sure that, and they could fit under an overall goal for the department, that if we reach a certain benchmark, certain positions within the police department would be eligible to be recognized for that. Because how do you say, well, if you if you answer so many phone calls, if you process so many documents, those kinds of things, how do you put a number to that? How do you clearly identify this is what it takes to exceed standards? One comment that's being made throughout the town, especially on the non-sworn side of the house, is we're hearing a lot of comments of, I do more work than people in other communities, so therefore I should be paid more than people in other communities. I'm not sure how you define that. Those of you who are supervisors heard me say it, I'm going to say it again, and for the benefit of those of you who were not here, is we get paid to do a lot of work. We get paid to work hard. We don't get paid to do the minimum amount of work possible. When people come to me and talk about how busy they are and how hard we work, that's the expectation. The expectation is that we are busy and that we work hard. We're not being paid to not work hard. So that's another culture shift maybe that we need to think about as we're recognizing it is okay to meet standards. The old philosophy of if you say that I'm meeting standards, that's kind of derogatory. That means that I'm just somebody else, and I work really hard. Well, the expectation is that you work hard. And it's not meant to be demeaning in any way. It's saying you're doing the job that we expect you to do. And we expect a lot out of you. So be proud of the job that you're doing. So these are some of the challenges that we're going to face as we move forward with pay for performance. So kind of to go back and summarize some of this to make it real clear. And one thing that we're trying to do, because we talked about this on the hiring side of the house, is that on the hiring side, when we hire somebody, when you look at the job announcement, we have that full range advertised. And it's almost false advertising, because people look at that and the expectation when they see that is that someday I'm going to get here. And the likelihood that someday they're going to get here isn't factual. We're going to guarantee them if you perform successfully, you're going to get to here. And anything, there is a possibility you can get paid beyond this, but getting paid beyond this is not going to be an easy task and is not something that's guaranteed. So what we're doing now, or what HR is doing, what you'll see in the job announcements that come out, is they're going to publicize the beginning to the job rate with a comment down in the section somewhere that you may be eligible to get more money beyond the job rate for exceptional performance or something along that line based on the town's pay for performance plan. The other thing that if you go onto the website and you look at the job classifications and ranges and stuff that's out there, you're going to see that that's also what's going to be posted out there now, is that beginning to the job rate. So that we're making that very clear to people. This is pretty much what you're guaranteed if you do a good job. Anything beyond that is going to be hard to get. One of the hard pills to swallow is that some of the discussions that we've had is that the consultant who worked with us is telling us right now that there are other communities looking at the way that we're implementing and considering going to the same type of program. Part of the problem in being the pioneer or the one that does something different than everybody else is somebody's got to be the first one to do it. And while you're the first one to do it, everybody else is kind of sitting over here with the old way of doing it, moving everybody through, if they're moving people through, because what we're being told right now is there are still a lot of communities that still are not moving people through their ranges, and those that are didn't do what we did for people who hadn't been moved to their job rate of moving people up to make up for those years. Is that they're looking at this program and considering it. Well, in the meantime, other people are still moving, so our folks see that. I understand that. Some will change, some will not change. Whether it's fair or not, that's for the individual to make that decision. But this is the philosophy. This is the program within the town of Gilbert. This is a philosophy approved by council. This is what's in place right now, and it isn't going to change anytime soon. So I'm going to shut up for a few minutes and see what questions you got so far. I know some people got to have some questions. Randy. I covered most of this in the recent newsletter, and there's going to be a centralized messaging coming out from the town. What my expectation is that you all have as good an understanding and as clear as an understanding to be able to answer these questions and send that message when those questions come to you. Realizing that it's not 100% yet how this is going to work, but this is laying the foundation so people clearly understand what the intent is behind pay for performance and behind, people are going, well, what are our goals going to be? I don't know. We haven't set those yet. Sandy? There is no such thing as cost of living anymore. The other term, though, that is out there that is the standard term is market adjustments. Market adjustments, and thank you for asking that question. Market adjustments are looked at every year. And what they do is they take those 50 positions, they go back out, and they take a look at what are our benchmark communities doing as far as adjustments to their ranges based on those positions. Then that comes back as part of the budgeting process to look at, are we still within council's philosophy on that 50 percentile? What I'll tell you for this year, we don't have a number yet looking at next year's budget. Whether there will be anything, if there is anything at all, it's not going to be much because we just did the market study this last year and came in, unless others have started moving theirs. And the other piece with market is that market adjustments are not automatic. Market adjustments are also based on successful performance. So if somebody is not, I'm just going to throw a number out there, this is not being discussed for the budget, but say they come back and say 1%. Everybody, the market is going to move 1%, which means the top of the range moves 1%, the middle, the job rate moves 1%. Doesn't mean everybody moves 1%. If somebody is not performing to standard, they're not eligible for the market increase. They get held up till they're performing appropriately, and then they get moved once they're performing appropriately, unless they're offered an opportunity for employment elsewhere because they're not doing the job they're supposed to be doing. So, but that's the other term. Cost of living infers that adjustments are made based on price index. That's not the case. Price index may not equal what others are doing as far as moving their ranges and keeping us compatible with our neighbors. But thank you. Jenna? The standard benchmarks are the standard benchmarks. And the reason for they can't look at every single job in the town, and they can't, the ones that are selected give a broad overview of the town, and they're based on, there's federal stuff, and he tried to explain so many points and some of those other things. I can't say never. I can say the standard is the 50 positions that were looked at, which is scientifically established as those are the positions that most, the problem that you've got is what we call something doesn't mean that's the same thing that somebody else calls it. So they have to pick positions that, first of all, have enough comparisons that they can look at to make the comparisons valid. And they have to look at positions that have the most common job similarities in order to reflect the market. I don't know. I could try to find out for you, or HR can find. In fact, if you go in and keep in mind, the other piece of this is we changed, there's job titles and there's job classifications, which we now are based on job classifications. And the benefit of the job classification system that also has got to make us think a little bit differently is that gives, if somebody is a specialist, we can move them to any other specialist job if they have the qualifications to meet that specialist job. Whereas before, we could only move you based on your job title. So job titles may have special qualifications that have to be met to fill that job title, but we have the ability to move people within those classifications without having to go in and reclassify a position, or without having to now advertise by each individual job title. It gives us that flexibility to move people around within the town. One thing that we haven't decided yet is rating cycles. And this is just a personal opinion. I think there will probably be a separate rating cycle for sworn, lieutenant and below, than non-sworn. And the reason I say that is sworn's based on overall successful performance, but on the non-sworn side of the HIDE, to exceed those standards, you're going to be given goals, and those goals are based on fiscal year. It would be extremely difficult to come in and try to give you all a group goal to try to attain, but your rating dates are all different. So this person has 3 months to try to reach that goal, and this person has 6 months, and this one has 9, and well, this one's 3, and that doesn't give us enough time, so now we're going to turn that into 15 months, if that makes sense to you. So I think there's a strong possibility that you may see, and this hasn't been settled yet, but you may see one cycle for non-sworn that's based on fiscal year, so all the evaluations are due at one time on fiscal year, and sworn based on their anniversary date. Because it's based on years of service when you are eligible to move to the next level. Again, that hasn't been decided yet, but I think that's a strong possibility. Questions, comments, concerns? Probably lots of concerns, but you might think of anything I haven't covered as far as how this system, the evaluation system will be electronic. It will, and I'll get to you in just a second, Jim. There will be a whole new performance appraisal system. It's all going to be done electronically. There is a human resources system that we're going to with the town where everything is going to be electronic. So your evaluations, your workstation files, commendations get directly inputted into it. It's going to give us a lot more flexibility on maintaining stuff, and it's going to make it a lot easier tracking, and will be much more effective. It's also going to be a lengthier system. You're not going to have just one box to check, meets standards or doesn't meet standards. There's different levels of the evaluation system. There's the core competencies, those things like loyalty, respect, and basically those town values that pretty much are a pass-fail. Either you got it or you don't. You either have integrity or you don't have integrity. There will be another level that are functional competencies that are specific to your job that will be 2 or 3 levels. Some of the discussions we've had is, and those competencies won't go towards exceeding performance. So we got to be careful we don't create a box up here that says exceeds performance, but then we tell you you're going to be paid more money for exceeding performance, but this doesn't count towards exceeding performance. So those are some of the little pieces that we still have to work out. But we also want to be able to look at that, and if there's somebody who's doing more work than average in an area, then we should still be able to recognize that. So we're looking at those pieces, or it may just come down to yes or no in those areas. Then there's going to be a goals area where goals are going to be established. There's organizational goals, there's departmental goals, then there's individual goals. And individual goals could be a team goal, not necessarily just for that specific individual. So there's still a lot of work to be done on that. Jim or Scott? Yeah, and they published, and you can go in, there's still the information out there on the town website that says, here's the 50 that we benchmark against. And what they'll do is, every year they'll do a snapshot, and then I think it's every 3 years they go back and do a complete compensation analysis for the town to take a look at that market piece. Denise?
You may not have the answer to this, but when it comes to the incentive-based bonus, you call it, have they looked at, or do you know if they're looking at percentage of something or flat amount? I just wonder how they budget for.
Yeah, basically, and we haven't figured that. First of all, we got to look at how much money is available and how much money can we put towards compensation. And we're just now in the budget cycle for this next year. So first of all, what funds are available, because everything is driven on funds available. And we haven't gotten down to the, one thing that I didn't tell you is that any exceeds performance that's going to be eligible for an incentive, one of the checks and balances to make sure this is fair and it's not based on a good old boy system, because that's one of the things we want to be very careful of is that we don't have that perception of only the boss's buddies get raises and same people get the raises all the time. Is all of those are going to have to come to the town executive board, executive team, basically the department directors, and we're going to have a consensus to approve any of those increases. So it will be looked at by a group of people, and whoever is proposing it is going to have to come in and sell us that they exceeded standards by this. We haven't decided yet, is it going to be universal or are there going to be tiers? Does everybody get the same? That piece has not been decided yet. But it is under discussion. The other piece everybody needs to understand on pay for performance. And I talked about this before, but I'm not sure reality has sunk in, that we have some goals that have been established for the end of this fiscal year, primarily at the department director level. We have not established goals yet for the next fiscal year. So what that means is as we get closer to the fiscal year, we're going to be identifying those performance goals for the next fiscal year of July 1st, 2014 to June 30th, 2015. When we give you the goals, you got to have time to be able to achieve those goals. You have to have time to be evaluated and to be rated on achieving those goals. So in all likelihood, you're not going to see any pay for performance based on a goals-based system until either the last half of the fiscal year, more realistically, the beginning of the next fiscal year. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. So July 1st, we give you the goal. July 1st of 2014. If you meet it by July 2nd of 2014, then right. Yeah.
It seems like a double-edged sword there,
Yeah, and one thing we got to make sure of is that we make this equal for everybody, and that we give everybody that equal opportunity. So, and you're being evaluated on your performance through the entire year. This is not an incentive program for, if you come up with one idea, and which is something that this job sharing, idea sharing that is more in line with what you're talking about, that somebody comes in with a cost saving incentive and they say, I can save the town $50,000, $500,000, whatever. They make their recommendation, they save the town this much money. In the private sector, it's not uncommon to say, you saved the business $50,000, you get a 10% cut of that. That's not what this is designed to do. It's not, because we got to give you that goal up front. And we can't give you a goal at the beginning of the fiscal year and then somebody comes up with an idea halfway through the fiscal year and now we've said, okay, you've come up with a good idea. That's not goals based. And we have to make sure, and whether it's, because you may hit that in a 3-month period, well, is it sustainable? Or did you just hit it once? So we've got to be able to tie it to your evaluation, to your overall performance, and make sure that it's sustainable and not just something that happens once. It's the best explanation I can give you. Denise.
Going on that, if you do meet or exceed expectations and you do get the bonus, you have increased your wages for that fiscal year. Are you still at market rate the next year?
Yes, because it's a one-time payment. It's a one-time incentive. If not, then it's adjustment to your base salary. And that, again, gives people that opportunity, if they didn't get it this year, but they got it this year, and it's recognizing performance at the time, because if not, what could happen? Somebody could do great this year and then turn around next year and be back to showing up to go to work. And there have been issues. One of the directors shared with us, he came from another community that this went the other direction, particularly they had the cost sharing system. And what they found was when people had that just one thing that they were focusing on, they focused on that one thing to make sure that that happened and then ignored the rest of their job and were performing to a minimal standard on the rest of their job because they were focused on doing this one thing that's going to make me more money. Any other questions? Meg? Yeah. Yeah, the question is, can you describe how the goals are going to be established and how they're going to be set? And it will be a trickle down. It will start at the organizational level where the town manager has identified these are things that are important to us this year. That trickles down. They identify, and already this year they've given me and the other department directors our tentative goals to get us through the end of the year, some things that we need to focus on. One thing I will tell you is the goals have to, looking at exceeding performance standards and those performance type goals that could lead to that have to do one of two things, or both. And that is save money or improve the quality of service to the community. And in those cases where it's an internal services driven fleet management's one that I'll give you. Fleet management doesn't do a whole lot to serve the community other than they keep us in our vehicles and they keep our vehicles running. They're an internal service. Our service is primarily driven externally. There are some services provided within the police department that are primarily internal service. So whatever your primary focus of your job is, service-wise, is where that focus needs to be as we establish these goals and we recognize people for pay for performance incentives. So to get back to the process, the department director gets it. Then based on my goals, then I meet with the commanders, establish goals for them. Then they meet with the sections underneath them to establish those sectional goals. Then there's a decision of how far down in the food chain that goes based on what we're trying to accomplish. Is this something that we're focusing on by the entire section or individuals or teams or that kind of thing? So it'll be a trickle down. There'll be a calendar established as to when those goals are examined, and then some goals will be established primarily to be focused on pay for performance. Because the other thing is, if we establish a goal, if we don't meet that goal, we don't want to set ourselves up for somebody to come in and say, well, if you don't meet your goals, then we're going to take money away from you. And then you're not doing your job. There are some goals that will be specific to trying to push that envelope to the next level, which is primarily those pay for performance type goals. There are other goals that will be established. This is where we want to be, and we're going to do our best to get there, but we're not going to penalize people for not getting there. Then there's those minimal standards that people have to meet, that the expectation is you got to be here, and if not, then you're down here and you're not meeting our standards, if that makes kind of 3 levels of performance standards and goals. Some good questions. If you got questions, especially on this, you know, as your folks have questions, if you can answer them, great. If you can't, one of the things that will be set up through this forum is that blog site, question and answer site on SharePoint, where people can fire me off a question, call me, come see me, and I'll try to do my best to answer the questions that I can the best I can. If I can't answer the question because we haven't made the decision yet, I'll tell you that. If you come to me and you ask me a question that there should be an answer to it and I don't know it, I'll go out and try to get that answer for you and come back and give you the factual answer. The big thing out of this is trying to get that clear message out there and get the facts out there. And we've said this a lot. To be quite frank with you, in a lot of cases it's been said and people haven't heard the message. Part of that is because we're still thinking along the lines of our old pay system. The old pay system is gone. We have a new pay system. We have a new philosophy. It's actually not a new philosophy because before we didn't have a philosophy. At least now we have a philosophy and we know what those expectations are. And we know where that's going to take us. So ask the questions if you got them. Today after we get done, if you got a question and you didn't want to ask it in front of everybody, come ask me. I really want to keep that flow of information going and try to give people factual answers and hopefully stop some of the guessing or this is what I think they're trying to do, or people need to vent, they can come vent. Okay. If I need to wear a vest, let me know before the meeting, or my helmet or something. But I understand, this is emotional. We're talking about people's money. We're talking about their future. We're talking about retirement. We're talking about keeping up with the Joneses. And I understand all of that. I understand we have people in this organization who have not had a pay raise in several years. The other thing that I'm going to tell you is there's an article in the paper today. If you haven't seen it yet, it's the annual Arizona Republic talk about who got what raises and compensation. And you're going to look at that, and there's going to be discussions that people had. Well, only the bosses got the big raises. It's not just the bosses that got the big raises. Quite a few of the bosses got significant increases. And the reason for that is those of us who got those increases have been that far behind everybody else for a number of years. Whether you agree with it or not, those are the facts. Those people were brought up to what that market has been established. My job rate is the middle of my range. I'll be honest, and I don't even know if it's in the article or not. My job rate was about $20,000 a year below the rest of the people that have the same job that I do, which means for all these years I've been making that much less than the same person who does the job in our surrounding communities. Whether you think that's right or not, that I got that raise, that you're entitled to your opinion. Those who did not get any raise probably really don't like that. I just throw that out to full disclosure. I don't even know if it's in the article or not. I think they only really talked about what the manager got, the deputy manager got, and the human resources director or somebody like that. But it was all based on the same, and the facts are there. You can look at it. I knew that before I went into the meeting by talking to my peers. And the same thing with the different ranks on the sworn side. The hardest pill to swallow is looking at that, yeah, but somebody else on the civilian side who's got 7 years on is probably here in their pay system, and I'm here at 7 years. I also know that there's people who are saying that, okay, where you're moving people up with either 2 or 3 years and getting them to the job rate, so I've got 10 years, I'm at the job rate, and I'm making the same as somebody who is at 3 years. Yeah. That's the way the system is designed right now.
Going out to the guys that have been here, like Dave and stuff that have been here 7 years, they're bumped up that bid range, these guys are coming up, and you're telling us, what you said, it's slim and none of ever getting the topped out. And these guys have been here for 7 years, how am I gonna keep them for the next 10? Well, I'm not moving anywhere, I'm not gonna go anywhere. And slim and none of getting a raise and getting to that top out point, what's the incentive for me to stay here?
It's slimmer enough that they're going to move through. Will have an opportunity to get probably one-time incentives, but it's the decision people have to make. That's the philosophy that is given to us now. What you're going to see when you read that article, it did interview a couple elected officials, and it passed with 2 non-votes, and there are some folks expressing their opinion in this that this went too far, that we should, instead of being at 50%, should be at either 40 or 45%. So there's a couple schools of thought here. I'll just leave it at that. And I state that as fact because it's in the article, and it's not to say they're wrong. They're entitled to their opinion. There's some belief that our benefits exceed what other places do, even though the consultant came in and said, no, that's not factual. And I think it's how you define benefits. The study said that our benefits are commensurate with our neighbors and aren't more. Some get more, some get more vacation, some get less vacation, some get more sick, some get, I mean, you got to go each one, and the overall package is that we're compatible with our neighbors as far as benefits go. Jim or Scott, somebody had?
I know you kind of mentioned this at the beginning, I guess. Was it ever discussed where they said if top out is truly the mid-range, is there a reason we don't just, as a town, say, hey, this is now our new top out, and just slide the scale down to show what the true top out is?
That,
Because I agree with what you said, that when people are looking at us from other agencies, I know working East Valley DOR chapter, we have a lot of officers from other agencies that are looking at us, talking about coming to Gilbert because they look at, what a top out is, and then if we're gonna say, okay, well, no, you're only really gonna get to the mid-range, that's gonna, I think it's gonna bite the town in the long run.
yeah. And for officers, it is the top, but for civilian that's why now we're advertising that the reason we can't call that the top is because then we couldn't do any pay for performance because you can't exceed your top pay. And at a future date, let's say that the town changes their philosophy and says, instead of the 50 percentile, we're going to move to the 55 percentile or the 60 percentile. Then if we didn't have something built in there to allow us to do that movement, then we'd have to go back then and redefine what the top of range is. And the range is based on 50%, so there's got to be a top to get that 50% to. So there's a couple different reasons why that's out there, but that's why we're advertising this is the range, while the official pay range still has some movement ahead of that people could have that opportunity to. And there may be a time that as we develop this and we can more clearly define an ability to move base pay based on pay for performance, that gives us that flexibility, not a you will get 5% until you get to the top, but eventually, because we got to start small, eventually there may be a move towards movement in base in addition to one time, one or the other, if that helps. Sandy? There's no bell curve. There's an expectation that not everybody, but there's not those. The question was, is there a bell curve type system, basically, and the answer is no. And what bell curve does is it says you've got this many who are eligible for this percentage, this many who are eligible for this percentage, and this many, and they call it a bell curve because it looks like this, and I've worked under a bell curve system. And that's a nightmare. And that really does sometimes tend to go more towards a good old boy system. So everybody has the same bite at the apple. Again, what we haven't defined is how that apple is going to be divided up when it comes to, and it could vary from year to year based on the availability of funds. Okay, just real quick, we've launched into the budget cycle. If you think of something while I'm talking about budget stuff or anything else that I'm talking about, then feel free to ask the question. But initial discussions, we had our first meeting now of the directors to now start whittling through all of the budget requests. I want to give you an idea to give you a flavor of what we're asking for. I want to say several times here and really emphasize that what we are asking for does not mean that's what we're going to get, even in positions. But I just want to give you an idea, and we've talked about some of this stuff. We are still in a position right now as far as the town goes. Revenues are looking pretty good. We project, based on revenues that are coming in right now, that are one-time monies that are available, which is basically a one-time influx into the budget, but it's not sustainable because you don't know if you're going to get that the next year. And the best example of that is construction sales tax. Construction sales tax based off the sale of a home. Well, it depends on how many homes you sell. And if we start dropping off again, then we don't have construction sales tax. So it's not sustainable. Right now we're selling a whole bunch of houses. So because of that, construction sales tax is coming in. That's what got us in trouble before, is we relied on construction sales tax as the golden goose to pay the bills, and then when that tanked, now we didn't have that money sustainable. So we break things down into one-time revenues, sustainable revenues, ongoing revenues. Our ongoing revenues are not as strong as our one-time, but we do have an increase right now in our sustainable revenues, which is what our base budget has to be built off of. When we ask for things, there are some things that we ask for that are one-times, that are like equipment, training, some of those types of things that we can address. But one thing we really have to take a look at, there are a lot of things that have been put off, like infrastructure, building improvements, building maintenance, some of those kinds of things that if there's monies available, we really need to fix those things when that money is there to fix it, in case that money is not there. You can't do pay increases, anything dealing with pay and benefits based on one-time money. When we ask for positions, we have to ask for positions based on what's available in the ongoing base budget of those monies that look like they'll be there next year, to keep those jobs there next year. So just keep that in mind. right now, we're in that position where there's still not a lot of fluff, and there's not a lot of room. The days of getting things that we'd like to have are over. And will continue for a lot of years to come in that cycle of getting things that we have to have, not things that we would like to have. We've talked time and time again about our staffing model, our staffing study, and how we get there. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but that's really the driving force of those personnel requests that we make. What I will tell you is that when we asked for positions this year in the budget, that was based on data from the year before. So we're 2 years, our data is now 2 years old. This year we ran the data again. And then to make sure that we're doing it right and to get another set of eyes on our projections, we got with the company who does the staffing model for us for patrol staffing, which is Corona Solutions, and we asked them, here's our data, you run the numbers and see if we're coming up with the same thing. And the answer is, we're coming up with the same thing. It's just to give you some big numbers, and patrol staffing requirements are patrol officers, not supervisors, patrol officers, crime suppression team officers, teleserve, and our civilian patrol technicians, or assistants, as they used to be called. Those 4 categories respond to calls for service and take calls for service. And while our civilian patrol technicians are limited on those types of calls for service that they take in teleserve, they still take that load off the patrol officers to keep patrol officers available for those calls that we need to respond to with folks with badges and guns, and to keep enough people available to respond as backups and those kinds of things. Everybody knows we're refocusing the mission somewhat of the civilian patrol technicians